Anticipated memoir, Always Another Country. Sisonke Msimang writes about her exiled childhood in Zambia, Kenya, as well as Canada, her young adulthood and college years in North America, and then returning to South Africa in the euphoric 1990s. She also reflects candidly on present-day South Africa. Sisonke Msimang joins us in studio to tell us more about her book. It is so good to meet you and have you in studio. Welcome.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I mean, this is a lot of work and a lot of heart and soul in this, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. A lot of work, 3 years of writing, and probably all of my heart and all of my soul.
Did you find that during this book, I mean, because a lot happens in 3 years, were you changing direction the whole time?
No, I didn't change direction because from the beginning I was clear that although it's a memoir, it's really much more about a reflection on the past and trying to talk about an aspect that we haven't really explored that much in post-apartheid South Africa, which is we have all these great heroes, and South Africans love nonfiction because we have such an interesting past, politicians and great leaders and great men, and I wanted to explore an ordinary life. So this is not a book about my achievements and accomplishments.
Yeah.
It's about just an ordinary kid's life who didn't bring about massive change. I wasn't a hero, I wasn't a leader, and I wanted to be able to say to South Africans, like, our lives are worth examining, even if that's not what you did.
Yeah. You write, it's such an interesting title of the book, Always Another Country. What do you mean by this? I mean, just talk us through that, firstly.
Always Another Country operates on many levels in various chapters in the book. So on the first and most obvious level, it's the fact that my family and I were always moving to another country. We lived in Zambia, in Lusaka. We then moved to Nairobi in Kenya. We then moved to Canada. We moved back to Kenya. My family then went to Ethiopia. I went to university in the US, and then finally came to South Africa. So always another country.
Always another country, and still your heart is all over the place. And it's a big problem. It's a difficult thing to carry with you. But within this book, there is so much that you discuss, and it's very open, it's very candid, and it brought back many memories for you, such as being sexually assaulted. I mean, and it's so topical at a time like this where we have Redi Klabi, who's brought out a book that is basically talking about the sexual assault during those years in exile by different cadres and leaders. Was it difficult for you to come out and document all of that?
No, because I think one of the things that I tried to do in the book is to be honest about various experiences and to demonstrate that the life of an African child is a complex one that has highs as well as lows. So I didn't want the book to be marked by tragedy and trauma. What I wanted it to be was a book about survival. And so I think while there's incidents that happen in the book that aren't fun, while there's an open discussion about sexual violence and about racism, it's also a book that's about how you find your inner strength and what the broader ideals are that the South Africa we always wanted to be. What are those broader ideals, and how you use those ideals to combat the things that happen in your life? Yeah.
So it seems like you have grown from those experiences. I mean, you talk about the emotional abuse you experienced in a relationship as well, but it seems that you've taken the lessons learned by them to make yourself bigger, to make yourself better, and teach others a lesson as well.
Hopefully. I don't know how many lessons I can teach, but certainly the book is an attempt to reflect on things that I think many young people are going through and have gone through. And it's also an attempt to open out a conversation, I think, amongst this generation. We've had a lot of conversations by older people in South Africa, and those have been important. But I think there's certainly, you mentioned Redi's book, I think there's certainly a moment right now when a conversation is being opened up by a new generation.
Yeah. Even in the prologue in this book, you already set the tone. Because you know that this is not going to be a normal read. This is going to be a very in-depth, all over the place kind of read, taking us back to the exile years, bringing us forward to where we are right now. There's just a paragraph that I want to read, and this will be leading into my next question, saying, today suffering and poverty, once noble, are not only commonplace, they have always been, but acceptable. We no longer rage against them. We've come to look past the pain of black people because it's now blacks who are in charge. The wretchedness of apartheid is ostensibly over, so the suffering of blacks under the rule of other blacks is somehow less sinister, which does not change the fact of its horror. That's the opening of this book. So you really are reflecting. I mean, you made a lot of sacrifices as a child and your parents for this country, and you're not happy with what you're seeing right now.
So I think it's really important to frame the conversation around poverty and inequality in South Africa as one that's essential for all of us to deal with. But I think it's also important for me to be honest that I didn't make any sacrifices. I was a child. I had no role in deciding where I would be born. That's an accident of history. I am not. The reason I have a platform is because of what I have decided to do in post-apartheid South Africa, to become a writer. And that's the only thing that I can take credit for. Yeah. I certainly can't put myself in a position of having made any sacrifices. And part of why that's important is because I do think we are in a time when lots of people want to be spokespersons to derive authority on the basis of what they may or may not have done in the past. And I think we're getting to a point as a country where it's important for people to claim authority on the basis that they are South African citizens who have a right to comment, to criticize, to applaud, to celebrate, simply because they're South Africans.
Yeah. You focus a lot about your childhood, and did you realize at the time, I know you keep saying that you didn't make any sacrifices, you did make a lot of sacrifices. I mean, this is your home, this is where your umbilical cord was buried, and yet you weren't allowed to be here. You were traveling all over the place, trying to fit into other countries and other cultures and other places and make friends, and then suddenly pulled up and gone somewhere else, and then you come back here and you're wondering, gosh, am I still welcome here? I mean, is it a book also speaking to a lot of other children that were in exile?
Yes and no. So again, I think one of the underexplored themes in our country at the moment is the whole experience of exile. And that's why, again, I say I'm very pleased with what's happening at the moment with the series of books that explore this idea.
Yeah, very.
And there's no question that in terms of my exile childhood, we grew up in a very sheltered, protected, what I would even say is the posher end of exile. There are many exile stories of children who had a much more difficult time. I think Fezega's story is an excellent example. Kwezi's story is an excellent example of a child who grew up in exile who had a much more difficult time than I did. So yes, there was pain involved in moving and going up and down, and there's certainly the pain of loss, of losing access to a country that you wish you could have known.
Yeah.
But how lucky was my family, and how lucky are we as South Africans that we were able to come back at a time when, people in Syria, they're not going to be able to go back to their country.
Yeah.
South Africa is lucky we were able to come back.
Yeah. I just want to touch on your parents for a little bit because obviously you pay tribute to your parents a lot here. And when I was reading a little bit about you, I read an article that you had written when your mom passed away. And my eyes just welled up. And I was just reading this article thinking, I mean, she was 63 at the time, and she just...
Yeah, very sudden.
Sudden death.
My mom went out the way she lived. She just decided she wasn't going to do all this suffering stuff. So it was very sudden.
Yeah.
But she was an amazing, remarkable woman.
Yeah.
And in some ways, yes, this book is a love letter to my parents.
I love that. And you don't say their names in the book at all. You call them Mummy and Ubaba. That's it.
Yeah.
So it's not about them as struggle heroes. They're your mum and dad.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's very important to me, especially because I worry a lot about the celebritization of exile, the celebritization of who's able to speak more on behalf of who. That to me, it was very important that this is a book about just this ordinary African kid who's trying to figure out a lot of things about where she belongs in this world. So it's for anyone who wants to figure out, like, how do you search for meaning in a very complicated world.
Yeah. Listen, I think that this is a beautiful book. When is your official book launch?
Book launch is this evening. Fantastic. At Exclusive Books in Rosebank.
Yeah.
So I hope people come along.
brilliant. I hope so too. Sisonke Msimang, her book is out. It's being launched this evening. It's a memoir of exile and home, always another country. Thank you for being so brave. Thank you for being so beautiful and outspoken.
Thank you for reading it, Leanne.
It's an absolute
I'm still
pleasure.
pleased that people read it.
Pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for being with us. All right, the time, 7:45 here on Morning Live. Stay tuned. We've got